Hello and welcome to this first video of my first foray into the world of City Skylines YouTube videos. I've shared a few screenshots in the past, mostly on the City Skylines subreddit and things. A few of those have been relatively solid, but I upgraded from a shitty old laptop about 6 months back. I've been trying to sort of improve my City Skylines game for a while since then. So I thought I'd try and actually get around to showing a few builds via these videos. This is episode 0, the Uncanon episode. I'll explain why I'm calling it the sort of Uncanon episode in a little bit. But what is in this video is what I consider essentially the sort of the pre-build. So essentially map editing, building the initial roads that are going to be there before the city was built, and a couple of small settlements that go here and there. So basically what was there before the city got founded. Most of this video is going to involve quite a few cuts. There was way too much game time that went into this pre-build stuff, and most of it is very boring. You can see here what was just building a lot of roads in fairly straight lines repeatedly. So I will be giving you sort of clips of that to give you a sort of idea of what I was doing, but probably won't spend too much time dwelling on it and giving you every single second of that gameplay, because God, it went on forever. So I'll explain a little bit more about sort of what you're seeing, and a little bit more about how I go about building cities and what the sort of storyline here is, and what you can expect in some future episodes. So the two things I love about playing City Skylines are, on the one hand, building weird, crazy, odd builds, and we'll come to some of those later in a few episodes' time. And second of all, the sharing of the narrative element of it. And I love creating these stories behind the city and what's going on and why it's happening and things like this. Those narratives may not be 100% believable. They might be like a slightly idealistic version, but this should be sort of vaguely plausible in my head. There are probably other great narrative builders, and I'm going to mention plenty of other YouTubers as the series goes on, but like people like Prez make great narratives around their cities. But one of the things I'm also really keen upon, and I think that is slightly different compared to what a lot of other city builders do, is I like my cities to be built from scratch narratively. What I mean by that is, to me, what you're seeing, it's all taking place in the modern age. None of this area of the town was built in the 60s and has been redeveloped since. If it wasn't there and we didn't build it, it didn't exist. No retrofitting in parts of the town, no saying this part of the town has changed. Town is founded from the day we start playing. Furthermore, any adjustments made once the game gets going have to be at least vaguely in line with that story, so I can't bulldoze through an entire neighborhood unless that town really did bulldoze through that neighborhood, and I have to face the repercussions of it, but I can't pretend it was always like that way. And I can't flatten an entire mountaintop and be like, this is now flat, unless somehow the city flattened the mountain, but that seems unlikely. So basically the city is being built as the game is played. We're not painting a finished city, we are building the city throughout the story. The other thing you'll see from me is I really like to make things as functional as possible. I'm a big believer in making builds work. I do like to try and make them aesthetically pleasing, but they should be functional. For instance, and I'm going to backhand compliment here, Design Candy, one of the best City Skylines YouTubers out there, makes gorgeous stuff that makes my eyes water. But a lot of his stuff occasionally isn't functional, and he confesses that himself. I tend to only build stuff if I can make it work somehow. I've had to tweak the rules of that a little bit here and there. Like, for instance, the power station is only vaguely functional, and you'll see that coming up later on. But that's one kind of challenge. But yeah, I think there are some things that you'll hopefully enjoy. Some things I'm not great at in this game. I suck at detailing. I really struggle with that. But hopefully I can make up for that with some of the sort of quality story narrative elements, and hopefully some very clever and cool builds. I think there's some really good stuff that's going to be coming up. I've already recorded like the first 4 or 5 episodes, and I built the train station, and I'm delighted with it, and I can't wait to share it with you all. I think that's going to be a great build. It's probably like episode 5 or something, but it's going to be wonderful. So this is the reason this is the Uncanon episode, because as far as I'm concerned, everything we're building in this episode was here when we got here, and it was like that to start off with. The city of Armstrong was built with this land, with these roads and these couple of small towns already here. So what is the pitch for what's going on here? Essentially, we're building somewhere in Ohio, so I'm going for that sort of Midwest feel. I have a personal connection to Ohio, despite the accent. So we're going to be building in Ohio. So as far as I'm concerned, this whole thing takes place about, say, 10, 15 years in the future. Basically due to changes in the global economy, and particularly, say, the farming economy. A lot of farms have become unsustainable and couldn't survive anymore, so a lot of the farms in this area have basically had to give up because they could no longer survive. And therefore you've got a lot of, this whole area is kind of suffering in terms of its economy and its life force that used to be there. So in Ohio, I've come up with this sort of moonshot idea to save this part of the country. Ohio is very nicely positioned between major cities, its land is cheap, it's very flat, accessible, etc. So they decide they're going to build a new tech-driven city, cut taxes for the big businesses, lure them in with this sort of brand new shiny buildings and things like this. And they're going to try and lure them in and basically create a sort of Silicon Valley of the Midwest, lure Google, Amazon, etc. away from the West Coast and set up in this brand new purpose-built town. So what we're going to be doing is building that town. There will be some really big buildings to make an impact, but most of all it's going to be pretty flat and spread out. Sort of a citywide campus feel, hopefully, is kind of the aim for what Armstrong should become. So that's kind of the sort of pitch for the city we're going to be building, and the sort of premise for where this storyline is going. So I've been talking loads already, so you've already seen a ton of buildings. So I'll sort of explain what's been happening to date and bring you up to speed of what you've been seeing on the screen. So originally just flattened out sort of the land, tried to get it together. This was based off a map I found on the workshop. It's a really nice map. It originally had a reservoir which I kind of bulldozed, and we're going to rebuild it as a part of episode 1. But yeah, I've twisted the map a little bit, and then I went through and built all of these farms just by using the resource painter essentially to build all these different farming sections. And there's a whole bunch of different old farms that used to be there. And then after that, I went through and painted in all of the fences around those farms, so we saw a bit of that. So that was pretty much all of the old farms being built, just these using the resource painter, and I think it looks really nice actually when you zoom out. I zoomed out a couple of times and I'm miles past that point in the video now, but you can kind of zoom out and get a really nice view of how those farms look. When you get up really close, they kind of look a bit tacky, but given I was doing most of the map that way, I didn't want to spend too much time with decals or anything crazy like that. So now I moved on to building the 3 small towns. This is the first one of those. It's called Elliott. It's fairly sort of rural, kind of middle class neighborhood. A lot of sort of places with ranch type properties, big gardens, that kind of thing. It's also one of the few places that's got one of the few farms remaining right at its doorstep, and it's kind of what's kept this small little community alive and kept it going, is having that farm right there. So a lot of this was sort of trying to build, you see me trying to sort of build the driveways for these houses here, and now finish in some of this forest area, and a bit will come to the actual building of the farm for this area. I wasn't entirely happy with this farm. I think this farm looks nowhere near as good as the second farm I built, and even that one I'm not super happy with. But you'll see in a bit, I don't think this farm turned out great. I will say Elliott kind of turned out to be the sort of forgotten child of the 3 towns. It's miles away from everything else, and I kind of just forget this area is here once I start the actual game. And I forget that I'm meant to be building stuff here and taking care of this town. Several buildings burnt down very early on, and I had to rebuild them. So you'll see a bit of that later on. But yeah, this is me now working on the farm, and I'm going to shut up for a few seconds, and I will join you once we finish this bit of farm and move on to building the second little town, which is a place called Squirrel's Hollow. So yep, that was all of Elliot, and you can see me here moving on to Squirrels Hollow, which is the second of these small towns. I owe a debt of gratitude to a few friends of mine on a writing Discord who suggested the names for these towns. One of them has a squirrel-based avatar, and therefore requested a town called Squirrels Hollow, so I obliged. That's where this name came from. So yeah, this is Squirrels Hollow. It's certainly the biggest of the three little towns. It's also probably the most run down. This little bit of it you're seeing kind of being built here is pretty nice, but the rest of it has a lot of fairly sort of run down looking houses that are pretty closely packed together. They're not like fenced out nicely with yards or anything like that. Fewer trees, that kind of thing. It's overall a bit a bit more run down and probably suffering a bit due to changing economies and things like that. It is, however, the only place to start off with that's going to have a few amenities like a fire station, a school, and a police station, which you'll see being built in a minute. And it's also got the second of the two remaining farms that are still here to begin with. So that was All of Squirrels Hollow, and then we come to the third town, which is called Junction. It's called Junction because it used to be at this crossroads of two, back in the day, fairly substantial roads, and as a result, a few diners and things like this popped around the area, and then a few houses and things like this. Over time, it's become a sort of mixture of these small little commercial areas. One little tiny commercial area with a few diners and things like this, plus two areas of houses. The first of those is some fairly nice houses, fairly similar to what we saw back in Elliot, that kind of level. And the second bit is going to be what's going to be the sort of nicest houses in the area to begin with right now, which is this sort of fairly McMansion-y kind of rural, I want my 2 acres in rural America kind of thing, with big privacy, tree lines and all this kind of thing. They're going to run along the side of this small little stream here. So you'll see that being built in just a second. So that was kind of the building of the 3 towns, give you a quick idea of what we have to start off with the city. We have these 3 small towns. So we have Elliot positioned over here, then further north. I kind of say that Elliot's kind of in the middle of nowhere and kind of got forgotten about as soon as I actually started playing. Squirrels Hollow is further up the map than that, and then to the right of that we then have where Junction is based. So this is Elliot. As you can see, it's fairly straightforward looking town, as a small little section of houses, and then to right we've got this fairly substantial farm. Do you remember I said when I was building it that large sections of things burnt down because I forgot about this area? Yeah, that's why that area looks a little bit empty. So then we have Squirrels Hollow. This is the farm of Squirrels Hollow, which I think turned out quite nice. I'm quite pleased with this. It definitely feels like it's got a sort of enough scale. There's maybe a few too repeated buildings there, but overall it's kind of nice. And obviously this particular farm also has still some cattle farming going on at it as well, so a little bit more substantial. And then we got the town of Squirrels Hollow with these houses here, the sort of more poor side of the town. There's a couple of rows of fairly nice looking houses down here, but then we have the school of Squirrels Hollow, and then the sort of small commercial section. We've also got the fire and police, you can see there. And then finally Junction, which you can see here. We've got this fairly nice section of houses here behind the commercial lots. And then the other side of the road, we reach this really massive collection of very nice looking houses. So that's kind of everything that's going to happen in this episode. In the next episode, we'll start building the reservoir, which is going to be the sort of first big building project. So I'll see you all in the next video.